Good morning, everybody. Got your coffee? I got mine. So listen, Black people, let's have a discussion. I think now is a really good time to talk, but to have a more nuanced discussion about internalized racism and exactly what that is, because I don't think that a lot of Black people understand it. And I talk about internalized racism all the time. And in hopes that if Black people really don't understand it, and that's okay if you don't grasp all the nuance, because it's a very nuanced discussion and topic and thing and state of mind and being. And it's okay if you don't fully understand it. But I would think that, people would just do a little bit of research so that they can get a better understanding. Because I don't always have time to go deep into these discussions, but I do want to get a little bit deeper into this discussion. Talk about internalized racism, what it is, what it looks like, why we should deconstruct from it, and how hard that work is, but how it makes us better in the long run. Just better Black people. Like everything, internalized racism is also on a spectrum. You got down here in the mud, and then you got way up at the top to the most conscious of Black people who are scholars and academics and really know what the fuck they are talking about when it comes to racism, internalized or otherwise. There's some people who are so down at the bottom that they will never be able to dig their way out. Some examples of that are people like Clarence Thomas, who actively married a racist white person. And he is someone who benefited from affirmative action and yet turned around and took affirmative action away from other Black people because the white people that surround him and control him convinced him that Black people didn't need it, despite the fact that he literally wouldn't be where he is without it. And then you got people like Candace Owens, who will tell you, well, if I'm living a great life, you could have lived a great life. You could have did it. Completely ignoring the barriers that a lot of Black people, a lot of obstacles that a lot of Black people have in our path because of racism and white supremacy. There are a lot of Black people who become successful in their own right who think like that. That they think that because they did it, all Black people can do it, not understanding that those barriers to Black success are real and they are very hard to navigate. And some Black people only navigate them because they're lucky, like they can play basketball, they can sing, they move in the right social circles, or they basically abandon their Black identity in favor of a white identity. And so white people don't see them as a threat to whiteness or white supremacy. And so they toss them a few crumbs. And those Black people, those particular Black people, are happy to catch those crumbs while simultaneously selling out other Black people. When I give an example of internalized racism, one that I like to give is because I like to give colorism as an example, because that's one that everybody can kind of grasp. Colorism is an example of internalized racism. Colorism is the belief that the lighter your skin is, the straighter your hair is, the more attractive you are in a multitude of different ways. And a lot of Black people feed into that. They think that the lighter their skin is, the better, or the blacker your skin is, the worse you are. You will have light-skinned, light-complected Black people calling dark-complected Black people black, ugly, nappy-headed. They are adopting the same racist ideologies and hateful rhetoric and beliefs And they are using them against other black people that they feel better, that they are better than because their skin is lighter. They are closer looking to white. I can remember being a child in, say, elementary school. And this was before so many black men started dating white women, before that whole thing happened. And I remember all they wanted were the little light-skinned girls with the good hair. That's all they wanted. My mother's first husband was very colorist. He was a dark-complected man who had a dark-complected mother. And my mother is a very light-complected black woman. His next wife was white. Now, it wasn't because he just happened to meet my mother and fell in love with her, the person, for who she was. And the same holds true with his second wife. It wasn't just because he just met her and fell in love with her, the woman that she was, for her own self. He fell in love with lightness and whiteness because he actively sought out women who were very, very light. That is internalized racism, and it's also self-hatred to a degree. So that's the example that I like to use oftentimes. But this goes way, 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 way deeper and way beyond that. One of the things, what makes me talk about this topic is because I know that I have discussions with black people all the time. I'm having a discussion with black people now. And in those discussions, whether they're on the internet or on real life, I notice that black people, because I actively deconstruct from internalized racism. Internalized racism, being black in a nation like America, we are all going to experience internalized racism. It's not a character flaw. So it's something that you can openly admit and own. It's not a character flaw. We have all experienced it. We all have it to a degree. But once you realize that you have problematic beliefs about blackness, it is your responsibility to deconstruct from that madness, because it is a sickness. It is the same way racism is. It's a disease of the mind, and you have to deconstruct, and deconstruction takes years. And as you peel away the first layer, saying you just own the fact that, yeah, you do kind of believe that light skin is better than dark skin, and you have had those thoughts and those opinions when you look at your grandbaby and say, oh, he gonna have good hair, or when you look and say, oh, he's light, or when you actively seek to make mixed race children because you believe that they are better than monoracial children, black monoracial children. It's okay to admit that. But if you don't admit it to yourself, you won't begin that deconstruction. You won't. You will never get to a point where black will be your default, and that should be the goal. Black should be the default. You should always put black before white in everything you do. And until you get there, you ain't even halfway there. And that's just the truth. But in having discussions with black people, one of the things that I notice that black people do without even noticing, because this is the most talking that I do. In my real life, I tend to be pretty quiet to the point where it upsets and bothers people, actually. But it also makes me a great listener. And I catch a lot of things that a lot of people don't catch when they're in the room. And one of the things that I catch in talking to black people is how we put self-imposed limits on ourselves. I hate that about us. That is internalized racism. But that's one of those layers that you're not going to get to until you go to that first layer. And you have to dig at those layers. And when you're actively doing the work of deconstructing, you won't never get to that layer when you are in conversation with black people and you notice how we put self-imposed limits on ourselves. And again, that's because society, a racist society, says that black people are not as good as white people. And somewhere in your mind, you believe that. And that's why you think that black people can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So if a black person says something like, for example, we should be attending HBCUs. We should be encouraging our children to attend HBCUs. And then let's say another black person comes along and they say, well, attending HBCUs is cool, but we should be doing this instead. That is a self-imposed limit that you don't understand that you're putting on black people. Because why the fuck would you not think that we could do both? Why does it have to be this or that? Why can't it be this, that, and the other? Black people were on this planet first. And there's scientific evidence to that. Feel your feelings. Black people walked this planet first. We were here first. Africans. So if we were here first, that means that we've experienced everything pretty much first. We had to figure shit out first. So what makes you think that we can't figure out how to do this and that at the same time? We absolutely can. You should be training yourself instead of telling other black people, yeah, but you should say, and also we should. Just that little, and that's how you start self-correcting that thought process. When you catch yourself doing things like that, when you begin that deconstruction progress, you'll start catching yourself doing things like that. I remember deconstructing from, I used to say white people and black people, but now I say black people and white people. That's because I am deliberate in putting black first. So whenever I have a discussion and I'm saying black people and white people, I don't say white people and black people. Whenever I am shopping for something that I have to spend a little bit of money on, if I can't, my first thought is buy black first. That's literally my first thought. I have trained myself to just take it there. And if I can buy black first, I'm going to buy black first. There is so many different ways that this nation, that racism, that white supremacy trains us to put them before us. It's one of the reasons why when I am having a discussion where I am clearly talking to black people, white people invite themselves into the conversation and feel like they have a place in it anyway. And they will use that they will do that in a multitude of different ways. They will use their proximity to blackness. I have black kids. I have black grandkids. My husband is black. But you not. You not. And I'm talking to black people. Or they will liken some other experience because maybe they can relate in some kind of way. And so they will liken some experience, like they may be a member of the LGBTQIA community. And they will say, as a gay person, I too know what you're saying. But you're not a black gay person. Gay ain't black. Or there are some people who will try to buy their way into these conversations, these very nuanced discussions that we're having with one another. And they'll say something like, oh, I sent you a package, or thank you for the package, but I'm talking to black people right now. You can't buy your way into these discussions. Like I said, I have sent donations back. Because if you think that because you send a donation that you bought yourself a seat to these discussions, think again. Think again. I'd rather cut you off and find new donors. I really would. We have to become deliberate in putting Black first. And you have to get very comfortable with that. And you have to get comfortable with not making white people feel comfortable in your space or with you or with your Blackness. That's one of the reasons why I don't code switch anymore. This is how I'm comfortable talking. This is how I'm comfortable speaking. Black people don't have no issue with it, except your Black people like your Candaces and your Clarences. Those are the only kinds of Black people that really, your elitist Black people. I call them Jack and Jill Blacks. Those are the Black people who think that if they are somehow socially acceptable, if they make themselves as a socially acceptable as they possibly can, that white people will like them better. That doesn't work. The whole respectability politic thing, it doesn't work. Be comfortable being your Black ass self wherever, whenever. And white people do not get to tell Black people how to act, how to be, how to exist, how to think, how to walk, how to talk, or, here's another really big one, how to respond to their racism. Which is why I always, if you notice, I never really check Black people in the comments when they talk about racism or how they feel about it. You do not get to tell the victims of racism. They don't, I should say, get to tell the victims of racism, you, how to respond to that shit. They don't get to tell you to calm down. They don't get to tell you that you're angry. You're the angry Black woman. All those things are racist. And so when we go into a space and we try to make them feel comfortable before we make ourselves comfortable, that is internalized racism. Now, that is not to be mistaken with protecting oneself, because I understand that when we are in their spaces, there are going to come time when we have to protect ourselves. And sometimes that is what code switching is. Code switching can keep you your check. And I get that. That's not what we're talking about here. We talking about everyday, schmegular, regular Black folks being Black folks. Be Black. Another example of internalized racism is the way I will put on a bonnet and go drop my husband off to work or go pick him up. And sometimes when I'm sitting, it takes him a minute to get out. So I'll do a video real quick. And Black people will always, I can be having really nuanced conversations, and Black people will have something to say about the bonnet on my head. The only reason why, now meanwhile, there are white women who walk around with messy buns, rollers in their hair, that ugly, foamy headband that they wear. In the 60s and 50s, it was not uncommon for white women to go out of the house to the grocery store to run errands with a head full of rollers and a scarf over their head. Look it up, Google it, I dare you. It was the norm. It was the norm. The reason why y'all have a problem with Black women wearing bonnets is because y'all consider it to be ghetto. And y'all consider it to be ghetto because you are thinking and caring more about white opinion than you are Black culture. And when Black people say something like, that's why they think we are steal, or that's why they think we are ghetto, that is another example of internalized racism. That you have bought into the belief that White people get to be individuals. They get to be lone wolves. One of them going to a school, massacre a bunch of kids, they're a lone wolf. But if one of us goes into a Walmart and steal a box of diapers, it's all of us. That is internalized racism. Controlling other black people for the benefit of white comfort is prime internalized racism. Let black people be. Let black people exist. Let black people be black. However they are black. We are not a monolith. I'm going to tell you another example of internalized racism. Racism is the way you always think that we have to defend ourselves to them. You ain't got to defend yourselves to white people. Who are white people? Who are they? Again, we were here first. Who are they to set the standards on what is polite in society and not? What is correct behavior and what is not? Who the fuck are they? Have you read their history? Have you read their history? Not just here in America, but throughout the world. The world is literally the way that it is because of white people. And that is just the truth. You believing that white people get to tell us how to behave is internalized racism. Do not allow white people to control you the way you think. And they have a lot of ways that they do it. They like to gaslight you. When you tell the truth, they like to just gaslight you, and like to argue with you in the comments. But if they see that that's not going to work, some of them are very polite with it. I call it nice. They're nice. And they try to nicely talk you out of your principles and core beliefs as a black person. Either way, they're telling you that you need to consider them before you do yourself. Whether they take it from one end of the spectrum or the other, whether they're disgustingly racist about it or whether they're pretending to be nice about it. That is one of the things that they need to be deconstructing from with their racism, is the fact that they don't seem to understand when black people are talking to each other. That is racism. Because when you go deeper, it is them feeling like they are entitled to every single space, every single conversation, every single discussion, and that we are merely an afterthought, and we should just be happy to have them here agreeing with us. That's racist. I can go deeper, but this ain't about them. It's about us and our internalized racism and deconstructing from all of that, which tells us in any kind of way that convinces us that we are second-class citizens, when we are actually the first-class citizens of the world, of life. We were here first. Why would you let people who came after you tell you who you are? Control you, manipulate you, gaslight you. It is your internalized racism that demands that you acknowledge them. And I can tell you, as someone who has done a lot of deconstructing, you don't have to. And you will get to a point where you won't even want to. No matter what nasty shit they saying to you. Remember when I told you the other day that I had that I guess it was a racist attack. I guess someone who hasn't been as far along in deconstructing as I have maybe would have been offended or hurt or angered or moved to crying. I can't care personally. I only brought that up to let you know that they are amping up on those racist attacks, and just beware and make sure that you are protected. But literally, I couldn't care. I could not bring myself to care. Because I am convinced in my Black self that I am so far above that shit that unless you put physical hands on me, I don't have to even acknowledge your existence. And I didn't. And the frustration that that man experienced in that moment. Deconstruct. It's worth it. Y'all have a good day.